Welcome to another episode of Business by the Numbers. I'm your host, Hunt Emrys, CPA with Parmelis and Associates. I saw a question posted in a shop owners group today that I thought was a really cool idea, and I see this a ton, and it's, can you really afford to close your business on Saturdays? Some of you have, some of you did, some of you will never go back, but how did you make that determination for your shop and what should you be looking at is exactly what we're going to talk about this week. Before we get into that, I just want to stop and say thank you to you and the rest of the dedicated listeners. Remember, if you want to hear a topic discussed on here or just have a question for me, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. Want to talk to me about services that Parmelis can offer for you and your shop? Shoot us a text at 301-307-5413. And lastly, we cannot forget our dedicated sponsors, NapaTrax and ProMotive, for being such loyal supporters of the show. If you had a great experience with Trax or you want to learn more about them, give them a call. If you want to get that next rock star for your team or you just want to hire the next person to fit in your shop, give ProMotive a call and they can help you out just as they have hundreds of other repair shops. As I was writing this episode, the whole idea here is, should you close on Saturdays? It was the original question, and I was thinking to myself, well, is this similar to closing on a Sundays? And I think it is to a large extent, but I'm going to stop you right there, right? So if you're looking at going from 7 days a week to 5 days a week, or even 7 days a week to 6 days a week on it, there's probably a couple more aspects that come in there. Now, some of you guys might be thinking, Hunt, why are you talking about that? Who the heck is open 7 days a week? Hey, there's some guys that do it. I don't have a ton of shops. We work with a little over 650 shops on a monthly basis. I have 3 or 4. Very unique, but yeah, they do it. All of these guys are gas stations, but all of these guys make a ton of money. So to kind of start this, I want to kind of take a look at the whole idea behind this, because what we're trying to do here is something that generally doesn't work in business. And I'm not going to take credit for this, but they told me this long ago. They said, this is a very easy industry. The automotive industry is a very, very easy money to make money in. You just have to work more, right? And anyone that disagrees with this, strip it down to its lowest level, right? Most basic form. How much could you sell your labor for and how cheaply could you do this, right? If you're willing to really bust your knuckles, right? No pun intended, do this, for 7 days a week, 10 hours a day on it, you are going to make a lot of money. Believe me. I don't think anyone here is going to disagree with that. And some of you guys might have kind of gone through this, but since we're not going to argue the fact that you can make more money in 31 days than 20, why are we having this episode? You can't do that for very long, right? And a lot of people realize, hey, at some point you get burned out and it becomes more than just the money, or it becomes about scaling it. Also, some of this has to do with the culture, right? A culture of a business that's open 7 days a week is a lot different than a business that's open 4 days a week. So just like I talked about in the beginning, that we're talking about closing Saturdays, but these ideas are very similar from going from 7 days a week to being open 6 days a week. You could, again, make the same argument that this is the same for some of my clients that are going from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week. If you take a look at all of my clients, right, if we have, I'm just going to use round numbers, 600 clients that I work with, probably 5 of them are open 7 days a week. I would say 15 of them are open 4 days a week. The majority of my other clients are open 5 days a week, and probably 20% are open 6 days. So if you want to take an overall snapshot of the general automotive repair business, the aftermarket on this, yeah, most of my clients are open 5 days a week. 25% are open either 6 days, 7 days, or 4 days. Now, we don't deal with a ton of franchises. We don't deal with a ton of dealership groups on this. Those are generally the ones that are going to be open more on the weekend. The conundrum that we're going to talk about this week, though, is what I've seen happen. I've seen it gone successfully. I've seen people change. I've seen people adjust. So some of this stuff that we're going to talk about is how I've talked with clients on assessing this idea, seeing if it makes sense, trying to set targets for this, and also kind of at the end here, a couple of different things that clients have shared with me, things that they have learned of, hey, beyond just the hours and shifting production, here are kind of the things that make that decision good or bad. So first and foremost, if you are going to try to assess if you can close on Saturdays, you need to figure out what you are trying to do here, right? you have one aspect of this. You're trying to do two things. I know which one of them is one, right? But you got to figure out what that second part is. So you are trying to work less, but you need to also quantify that. You are trying to work less days of the week, right? You don't want to work on Saturdays. So right now, are you open a full day on Saturday or are you working a half day on Saturday? If you're open a full day on Saturday, it's going to be a little bit harder than if you're working a half day on Saturday. Because if you say, well, Hunt, I don't want to upset the apple cart whatsoever. I want to still have the same amount of hours in a week. You're working 4 hours on Saturday, 5 hours on Saturday, then add those hours to the week to Monday through Friday. You get rid of working on the weekend, you still have the same amount of hours. And if you look at this in a simplest form, you have the same amount of capacity to make the same amount of money, right? So in that situation, you're not actually working less. You're working less days, but you're going to make the same amount of money, right? If you're working the same hours and you want to make the same amount of money, that should not be that hard of a equation. You've got to probably have to figure out who will not come on the weekdays. They only come on Saturdays and replace those handful of people. But if you're willing to commit that time that you're giving up on Saturdays to the other days of the week, arguably there should not be no drop in production. Now, most people are not trying to do that. Most people are trying to do this along with their regular goals, right? And so if you're looking at your business and you assess what you did in 2024, and the line is here, right? And for those of you listening and not watching this, I'm putting it about halfway up the screen. So if your line is about 50%, right? What are you going to shoot for the following year? You're always going to shoot for more, right? 51%, 52%. You're always looking to improve. So if you're looking to make this change of, hey, we worked Saturdays in 2024. In 2025, we don't want to work Saturdays. I don't think that you're probably negotiable on taking a step back in profit either. So your mentality might be, hey, I want to work less. I want to work less weekdays, and I actually want to make more money or continue on the growth path. Now, some people here, and this is probably the most common one on here, is you would look at this and say, hey, in the short term, there's no way around this. I'm probably going to be shifting this. I'm probably going to be affecting productivity, but I hope to be able to work less days, generally work less hours, right? So people want to completely drop the Saturday hours and not increase their weekday hours, and I want to make the same amount of money, right? So this is the process that we're going to go down through. This is the process that we're going to work on. We're going to be working less hours and days, and we want to make the same amount of money. I think that ultimately this should be everyone's objective on this. It's doable, and this is ultimately what most people end up doing. Now, the last thing on here, and I don't think that any of you guys should shoot for this, but if you want to work less and you want to make less, then just close Saturdays, and that solves itself. Now, that is a big tongue-in-cheek there, right? Because if you want to make less, it's pretty easy to make less money. But one thing that kind of goes hand in hand with a couple weeks ago's episode is, how much is your time worth? How much is your team's time worth, right? So don't get too literal, right? Don't put your account hat on there and start just getting really granular on the profit of saying, hey, we made $975 open Saturday, and now we only made $925 open Monday through Friday. We're losing money, right? But at what cost, right? At what benefit of morale, motivation, et cetera, et cetera. I think you get the point. So before we kind of come up with a formula to calculate how to do this, how to look at your break even, how to replace these sales, these are a couple other ideas that come even before this, right? So first and foremost is, what does your team want to do? So this has not really come up on a 6-day to 5-day work week question, but I know my client that he went from 5 days to 4 days. About half of his team did not want to go to 4 days, right? So this is something I would be absolutely mindful of, right? Let's say that you have a pretty well-run shop right now. You don't have to work a ton on Saturdays, or maybe you don't have to work Saturdays at all, but you have this perception that your team does not like working on Saturdays, right? So you're going to move and you're going to get rid of Saturday hours. There's teams out there that want to work on Saturdays. It's not me. It's not something that I agree with on it. But again, a lot of you guys are trying to do this stuff to help out your team, right? So make sure that your team wants to do it. Another thing on this is, make sure your customers care or don't care, right? Now, to a large extent, if you allow your customers to tell you what they care and don't care about, you're going to have a business created by your customers, not created by you, right? Now, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, if you have a business that does not listen to what your customers want, you're going to have a very terrible business for a much different reason, right? So you need to be aware of what your customers like and what your customers don't like, right? If you're a tire shop, if you are a European shop, if you're a diesel shop, if you're a fleet shop, you guys are going to have much different demand on a Saturday than each other, right? And even if you're in a different zip code, if you're in a different state on this stuff, this all really depends, right? Take a look at these reports. What are people buying on Saturdays? Is this really impulse buy? Is this stuff that could have been scheduled? Are we scheduling on Saturday? Or are they scheduling on Saturday, right? Really kind of get into the psyche of what is going on there and what kind of people are coming in on Saturdays. The simplest thing that you can do on this is if you look at this and you look at Saturday and you look at the amount of production that you have on Saturday, you need to figure out how to do that Monday through Friday, right? Because if you can figure that out, then we still have the same weekly sales. We just did it in 5 days, not 6 days. And this kind of leads us to the very simple calculation, but the calculation nonetheless, on how do we do this, right? So the biggest thing that I'll tell people is a lot of people overthink this. And it is, I was really kind of going down through this, and even looking at my notes right now, I'm kind of, embarrassed of myself because this seems like, pretty straightforward, but I don't think you need to overthink this stuff. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do the same amount of production in a least amount of days or least amount of hours, right? It is kind of working smarter, not harder here. So if we're taking a look at this, I'm not even really going to look at my sales on Saturday. I'm not going to look at my sales on Friday, my sales on Monday, and see what I can do. At first, I'm going to just take a look at the overall picture of the business to make sure that this can make sense. Because remember, in this situation, we're going from a shop that's open 6 days or 5.5 days, and we're trying to go down to 5 days. We're not increasing the business hours of Monday through Friday. We're trying to take work done in this period and do it in a shorter period. Can it be done? Yes. Does there need to be improvements? Obviously. Right? And so what I would look at is I would take a look, and you could look at sales dollars, you could look at a ton of stuff. I usually just look at hours, because in this exercise, we're kind of looking at capacity, realistic, et cetera, et cetera. So if I go back and I'm going to say the last 6 months, the last year, whatever you want to do, I want to see how many hours we're doing in a week, right? So if I went back and I looked at this, and let's say that we're doing 100 hours a week, I know if I'm open 6 days a week, I need 16 hours a day, right? If I'm open 5 days a week, I need 20 hours a day, right? Because we need to get more hours in those days because we have less days to do it. So if you're going back down through this, and let's say these are your numbers, and you're like, all right, Hunt, I'm producing around 100 hours a week. I'm working 6 days right now, and I want to go to working 5 days a week. Can I do this? And I would say yes, but how many employees do you have? Right? And this is going to be the big thing here. And this is where you guys might look at this and say, I want to go to 5 days a week, but I'm going to be really a disservice to my team because I'm going to be setting them up for disaster here. So the reason I say is if you have 2 guys, this probably will not work. 3 guys probably will, is look at those hours, right? If we have 2 guys and they need to produce 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, most people are there 8 hours a day. Theoretically possible, would still be some very, very strong production numbers, right? Averaging 50 hours a week out of 2 guys, strong numbers. If you have 3 guys on this, right, that's not crazy production, right? That's these guys averaging less than 6 hours a day. Absolutely, absolutely doable. So if I'm this shop and I'm looking at this and saying, hey, if I got 2 guys, you could try to have them go to 5 days, but they really better be on board with this because they're really going to be busting their butt to do this, right? Or if you guys want to do this, it's just a lot of time to fit into 4 or 5 days here. You might need to go out and hire another person, right? And this is where you kind of go in and you might look at this and say, hey, if we go from 2 guys working 6 days a week and we now have to hire a 3rd guy, but we do the same amount of work in 5 days, you're making less money, right? Because now we have the same amount of sales, but we have more cost because you have another technician. So what people find a lot is you have to take a step back to take a step forward, right? Maybe this is your push to hire that third technician. By shutting down on Saturday, you got to get that third technician to make sure you have enough people to do it Monday through Friday. But that third technician also allows you to go to another level and increase your sales even more, right? So sometimes these conversations are not just as simple as, well, hey, can we close on Saturday? Are our customers going to be able to figure it out? Can we handle it? Can our guys handle it? And what does this ultimately look like, right? So when it comes down to this, like I said, I like to do hours because hours is tangible to, limits on what people can produce and what people can, have inputs on. If you want to do this by sales, it's the same idea, right? Hey, you're doing $60,000 of sales a week. That's 10 grand a day. If you want to do it in 5 days, you got to do 12 grand a day, right? At the end of the day, if you have the same amount of sales, it doesn't matter what days you did it in. And if you can do it in one day, then do it, right? Like I said, it's maybe some of you guys are listening to this and you're at 7 days a week and one day you're going to be at 4 days a week. Everyone wants to work less and make the same money. And if you can, make more. Before we kind of wrap all this stuff up here, like I said, there is a couple things that I've blended in here and that I put along the episode of kind of tips and tricks. I mean, most of this stuff is real life examples, or all this stuff is real life examples from shops going down through this. And kind of just share some of these things. So first thing is, don't expect overnight success. You are closing a day of the week. You are changing the habits of maybe years, maybe months of people. If you don't have a drop down in the first week, it is not a norm. That is, abnormal. It is a good thing. Generally, this takes you guys around 90 days where I would say, hey, we're open Saturdays. I would expect to see a production or sales decrease over the next 3 months. Usually around 90 days, you guys have this figured out. Customers are used to doing this. You guys are used to doing this, and all things are going fine. So again, implement this stuff, analyze it. Do not have these knee-jerk reactions when it doesn't work immediately. Sales shift when you want them to, right? Changing your hours generally means changing your procedures. So like I said before, a lot of this was my clients telling the customers, hey, we're not open on Saturdays. You need to drop it on Thursdays, right? Hey, we'll pick it up. We'll drop it off. Some of my clients even get a little bit more creative to say, hey, I do have that really good fleet guy that likes to pick up and drop off on Saturdays. Why am I going to have my crew of 8 here on Saturdays? I'm just going to hire this admin kid for like $15. He sits there for 4 hours on Saturdays and checks people out and gives them keys, right? So just because your entire team doesn't work on Saturdays doesn't mean someone else doesn't have to be. A lot of people that also do an off-service answering or an off-hours answering service on weekends can still pick up cars. If you have an automated system for keys, processing payments, right? There's ways to do this without having your full team there. And so lastly, but surely not leastly on here, the team generally will make it work if they want to make it work and vice versa, right? It's the first thing that I said on here. Most of you guys are doing this for your team. Half of you guys will find out that your team doesn't want to do it, so they want some other variation, right? So you're trying to make their lives easier. Listen to them, see what they want to do. Try to match that up. But again, right, if the team's not on board with this, they will be the first one to shoot this down, no matter how bad you want to close on Saturdays. So there are many different ways to unpack this, and depending on the shop and type of customers that you have, this could be a no-brainer or extremely difficult to pull off. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet, but is the most resounding benefit that I hear, is attracting new talent, right? In this market, rates are pretty competitive between you guys. And when I see shops competing on technicians or advisors, you guys are generally offering similar pay and similar benefits. But what if one of them is comparing a shop that's open 6 days a week and the other one with the same benefits and same pay is open 5 days a week or even 4? Which one are they going to pick? Right? As always, please share with friends. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episode, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. If you want to talk about accounting and taxes for your shop, shoot me a text at 301-307-5413. Just want to say thanks again for listening on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Don't forget to check out the rest of the incredible lineup on the aftermarketradionetwork.com and on your favorite podcast listening apps. So thanks again for joining me on Business by the Numbers. Stay safe out there, and I will talk to you all next week.